Drive. This has been the 16-play drive for the Raiders. Well, here's a seminal point in the game and maybe the season as the Raiders try to get that first victory. Derek Carr tries to come up with the moment of his young career. First and goal to go, 9-yard line. In the shotgun, Carr's going to throw, pumps, looks end zone. The Raiders at last have won a football game.
That just says about the fight in this team. To be able to do it, I'm just so happy for my teammates. To see them smile, we're running the ball good, and him come back to the huddle fired up, feeling good about themselves. That's the kind of stuff that fires me up. That was awesome.
Raider Nation, what is going on? I'm Hardcore Raider. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Just wanted to say cheers. Hopefully, you guys are having a good one. Got a pretty important topic I wanted to pre-record for you guys, kind of talk about some opinions and stuff. Shout out to Derek Carr. Always have a lot of respect for what he did for this organization, this franchise, and all that he went through. I know this video is going to there's going to be people on both sides of the fence, right? So I'm kind of tell you guys why I'm thinking about doing this video. My plan for the Raiders, now that, I've talked about it, so far this offseason is we have a three-headed monster, which is offensive coordinator, scheme, and quarterback. So I feel like we've gotten the, offensive coordinator situation taken care of. I feel like I kind of understand the scheme that we're going to have. And with that being said, then we got to look at the quarterback situation. So, I'm looking at this Raiders offseason as what quarterback, no matter if it's the draft or free agency, what quarterback gives us the best chance to win a Super Bowl in the next 1 to 3 years. Okay. So if I look at it from that standpoint, I've kind of gone back and forth a few areas, but I've came to the conclusion that my number one pick would be Kirk Cousins. I wanted to sit on it, wanted to marinate on it for a while before, I just kind of, really did a deep dive into it. And so this video, I'm going to do my best to be fair on both sides of the fence of the Derek Carr versus Kirk Cousins debate and, kind of break it down and, look at it from all sides of the fence. Now, let me tell you guys, like, as I've thought about this, I know like someone had said something, but it wasn't this exact words, but someone had said something like, if the Raiders are going to get Kirk Cousins, you might as well have just kept, Derek Carr. And I'll be honest with you guys, it is a valid point. Like, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to, even though if you guys know me, I was ready to move on from Derek Carr, mainly because of the contract and the amount we'd have to pay him. But even though I was ready to move on from him, Kirk Cousins is going to want a similar contract, I feel. And, so to the people that are like on the, pro Carr side of the fence, they do have a valid point that if, we're going to get Kirk Cousins this offseason, is he really that much of an upgrade from Derek Carr? So my objective in this is to try to be fair to all sides of the fence and all sides of the coin and kind of break it down the best I can and try not to be one-sided one way or the other and kind of look at it from both sides. So, you look at scheme, okay? I've talked this offseason about quarterbacks, and I feel that we need to break the quarterbacks down into a more, a better vocabulary. And to me, that's like 4 different categories or styles of quarterback play. At the bottom, I would say that's pocket passer. Next would be scrambler. Raider Ben brought something up talking about improvise style quarterback. And I like that, but I think improviser and scrambler quarterback are almost the same, but you could almost make another category if you wanted to have like an improviser quarterback. Okay. So, but you have pocket passer, scrambler, improviser. And then from there, I would say mobile quarterback and running style quarterback. So when I look at it from that standpoint, now that we have, Luke Getsy as the offensive coordinator, I think we're going to be looking for a scrambler style quarterback, maybe a pocket passer / scrambler. So to me, that means Justin Fields is straight up off the board. He's like not even in the same realm as far as I'm concerned. Plus him and Getsy may not get along, and there's some other quarterbacks that might fit this as well. But for me, I mainly want to just focus on Kirk Cousins for now, because like I said, this is the people that would say if we get Kirk Cousins in free agency and we moved on from Derek Carr, it is a valid argument, that people will say, well, we should have kept Derek Carr. Now, before I broke it down, I'll kind of go over some topics that we're going to get into. But when I looked at it, I was like, Kirk Cousins to me is probably a little bit better than Derek Carr, but I don't look at Kirk Cousins like, a Joe Montana by any means, or a Tom Brady or something like that. So, when I wanted to look at this, I went into it knowing Kirk Cousins probably isn't much. It might be a little bit of an upgrade from Derek Carr, but I don't feel like it's much of an upgrade. Okay. But I do feel like Kirk Cousins right now gives us the best chance to try to make a Super Bowl run in the next, I'd say 1 to 3 years. So, and I know there's the Carr haters may not like this and the Carr lovers may not like this, but I'm going to try my best to be objective to both sides of the fence. Okay. All right. So for one of the first topics I want to talk about is essentially contracts. And to me, I don't feel that either quarterback earned their contract. Okay. When I look at like a quarterback and what they're earning and what they're going to make, the contract, the money has to play a factor. I know everybody thinks NFL teams have an endless pocket and they can pay quarterbacks or players, whatever. But, the way I've, dissected the Derek Carr contract for years was if you pay your quarterback too much money, it doesn't leave enough for other, positions on your team you're going to need. So if, maybe if the Raiders would have gave Carr that contract, maybe we can't keep Devontae Adams, or maybe we don't give Max Crosby a contract. All those things play a factor, when you're looking at this stuff and the dollars and stuff. So before we kind of get into some of their careers and stuff, I do want to say is like, look, there's valid points, and I know if we get Kirk Cousins, people are going to like lose their mind and like we should have kept, Derek Carr. I was ready to move on from Derek Carr because of the contract and a few other reasons, but it doesn't mean that the Raiders, I guess you could say, doesn't mean, we've made an upgrade by any means. So, with quarterbacks making this much money, and if they're not going to the playoffs and winning playoff games, I mean, you got to look at it from a dollar standpoint. Like I hate to put it like that to some degree, but to another degree, I don't, and I looked at Derek Carr throwing the ball down like 3rd and 4th down sometimes. And then the lack of production, it fired me up. But even though I kind of want Kirk Cousins, it doesn't mean that he's much of an upgrade, to be honest with you guys. You know what I mean? You're kind of, trading. So you'd be swapping someone that's not a diehard Raider fan like Derek Carr was versus someone else, which is another like valid point, which is important to me. But, I look at the Kirk Cousins thing coming off the injury and some of that. And then I try to look at this from a standpoint, well, like the Raiders have a lot better wide receivers than we had in the past. Okay. I think that's important to understand because it's true. Like we have Devontae Adams and now Jacoby Myers and, Trey Tucker. Where in the past, you could argue that Derek Carr didn't have those kind of weapons. Okay. Our defense, we also have a pretty darn awesome defense right now. And Derek Carr didn't really have that in the past. So before I get into this, I just want to say, like, there's valid points that, if Derek Carr could be a lot more successful with the current Raiders now than what we previously had, but so could a Kirk Cousins or another quarterback like that. So to me, like, I don't think the Raiders need an elite quarterback. Now it'd be great. Yeah, it'd be nice, but I don't even know if the Raiders could trade up in the top 3 to get Jaden Daniels or something like that. So that's the other factor to consider is like, do the Raiders, where we're at right now, and the scheme that this offensive coordinator is going to want, does it make sense for us to try to like, spin the farm or trade the kitchen sink to move up and stuff? And for me, I feel like we have enough weapons in place. And with this defense where an average to a good quarterback, I think we could actually win a championship. I really do. I don't think they have to be a superstar. I think they need to be good, and maybe great at times, but I don't think, as I've looked at this, that we need a superstar. Okay. But they got to be able to execute and they got to be able to fit the scheme. So with that being said, let's kind of break down both these quarterbacks and, kind of some of the topics we'll cover. We're going to look at stats. I know stats aren't everything, guys, but we're going to look at like their draft, their age, how many years they've been in the NFL, the contracts, like I mentioned earlier, injuries, playoff wins, total wins, comeback wins. And, the last, which isn't as important to me, it will be like rushing, because a lot of people want to look at the mobile style quarterback. So that being said, appreciate you guys. Make sure you hit the like, the subscribe, and let's get into, we'll start with the Kirk Cousins here. Okay. So right here with Kirk Cousins, 6'3", 205. He's age 35 right here. And then he was drafted, I think it said it in the other link, but he was drafted in the 4th round of 2012. Okay. So Kirk Cousins, 35, went in the 2012 draft. Remember, he was drafted along with RG3 with the, I think that would have been the Redskins back then. So, and then we'll pull up Derek Carr right here. So Derek Carr, age 35, and then he was drafted the 2nd round of 2014. So, you look at it like that, guys, and you're like, yeah, Kirk Cousins, like 3 years older, was drafted at like 2 years earlier than Derek Carr. And then it's like, okay, so let's like kind of look at the stats. Okay. And there is going to be film tape on these guys. You could break it down like that. There's a lot of different directions you could go, and stats aren't everything. I know stats aren't everything. Okay. But there's a few things that stood out. Okay. So we're going to go over the total stats, and then we're going to go over some things that I noticed when I was looking at this. So right here, we have the Kirk Cousins right here, guys. And I'm going to scroll down to his passing. And again, we'll do like running and stuff last. So when you look at Kirk Cousins, I was going to do this where it was the same amount of years played in the NFL. Okay. But you look at Kirk Cousins, he was drafted 2 years earlier than Derek Carr. Okay. But his total games, because he didn't start, when you look at Kirk Cousins, he didn't start as many games as Derek Carr has, guys. So, give me once. All right, so with Kirk Cousins, a few things I want to point out here. I'm going to look at more totals, guys, but 150 games played, okay? Then I'm going to hop over real quick to Derek Carr. And Derek Carr had 159 games played, okay? And the reason for that, so Derek Carr has 9 more games played than Kirk Cousins. So when I was looking at this originally, and so here's Kirk Cousins, I was looking at this originally, I was like, it's not fair to do, if Kirk Cousins has 2 extra years than Derek Carr. However, if you look at his first years in the NFL, he only played 3 games in 2012. This is Kirk Cousins. And then 5 games, 2013, 6 games, 2014. So because of that, and Derek Carr played 9 extra games more than Kirk Cousins, I think it's probably a fair assessment, even though Kirk Cousins was drafted 2 years earlier and has two more years experience. I think it's probably a fair assessment just to use their totals. Okay. Now I did go through and I gave some differences just because I want to see like the difference of some of these stats between Derek Carr and him. Unfortunately, guys, I'm not savvy enough computer wise to kind of do a spreadsheet and show you guys the difference. I really wish there was like somebody out there that had an app or something where, essentially if we could pull up 2 players, right? Say we want to compare Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, where like you just pick the player and it would be like an app or a website that would compare them side by side. And if one exists, I just don't know about it, but you compare them side by side. You can see one's total touchdowns compared to the other person's total touchdowns, total passing yards, the other's total passing yards, total games played, and be able to compare them side by side. I mean, there's so much, I'd say debates of like, is this quarterback better than that quarterback or any position, wide receiver, that I would like a website that could like just pull it up side by side and we could look at both of them at the same time and compare. And, and then it do like the difference totals for you. But I haven't been able to find anything like that. And it'd be, I have to be a lot more computer savvy to be able to do that. So, all right, let's pull Kirk Cousins back up. So I've had to kind of do it manually is the point. So he's got 150 games. Derek Carr has 159. He's 76 and 67 and 2. So it's not like he's won a ton more games than he's lost. He's just, looks like a little bit above the 500 mark. Okay. And then a little bit above the 500 mark there. Completions, 3,465. Attempts, 5,177. Completion percentage, 66.9. Total yards, 39,471. Total touchdowns, which is important to me. There's a few of these that are more important than others, but total touchdowns I think is real important. 270 total touchdowns for Kirk Cousins. touchdown percentage, 5.2. Interceptions, another important one, 110. And then the interception percentage, okay, this is the percentage of times intercepted when attempting to pass, minimum 14 attempts, scheduled game, qualify as leader, minimum 1,500 pass attempts, qualify as career leader. So anyways, it's interception percentage, 2.1. And then a few other ones that I thought was important in here. Let me scroll over here. Okay. All right, you could either do QBR or you could do just the rate right here. So 98.2. So I think that's kind of important. And then one of the other ones I thought was important is times sacked. Okay, 304 times sacked. Then yards, that's another one I think is important. This is like how many yards you've been sacked. So how many yards you lose because of a sack, 2,207. And then you got the sack percentage, 5.5. And most of the other stuff I'm not that concerned about. But I do feel there's a few things I feel when we're evaluating this stuff that's important, I think, to look at. One is like QBR, or you could do like the rate, the amount of times sacked total, and then the yards lost. The total touchdowns is important to me, right? The interceptions is important to me, and then total yards, okay? And you could just do completion percentage as well instead of doing the QBR and stuff like that. So, and then the win percentage. So those are important to me, right? Scroll down a little bit and then we'll look at the comebacks. All right, so 22 comebacks and then 28 game-winning drives. So that's important to me too, is like comebacks and then game-winning drives. So he's 22 comebacks, 28 game-winning drives, okay? And let's bounce over here to Derek Carr. So we're going to look at the Derek Carr stats, and then we're going to kind of look at the differences after we go over this, all right? So appreciate you guys being patient with me. Make sure you guys hit the like, subscribe. So here's the total games, 159. Again, he was drafted 2 years after Kirk Cousins, but he's also got 9 more games, 72 and 87. So Kirk Cousins was, above 500 as far as win percentage. Derek Carr is below 500. Completions, 3,576. Attempts, 5,506. Completion percentage, quite a bit lower, which we'll talk about coming up here, 64.9. Total yards, 39,100. Touchdowns, 242. And then touchdown percentage, 4.4. Interceptions, 107. Another important one. Okay. And then let's kind of scroll over here to the rate and then the QBR. So the rate is 97.7 and then the QBR is 56, or no, that's for 2023. Sorry. 92.3 for the rate. And they don't give a total for either for the QBR, where their career is at right now. Sacks, he's got sacked 295 times. Yards, this is the yards lost from sacks, is 1,842. Sack percentage, 5.1. And most of the other stuff, not nearly as important to me, okay? So then we'll scroll down just a little bit here so you can see it. So Derek Carr has more comebacks. He has 28 comebacks, and he has 34 game-winning drives. So Derek Carr, you could almost say by that stat that he's more of a clutch quarterback than Kirk Cousins with the comebacks and the game-winning drives, okay? So now I'm going to leave Derek Carr's one up right here, guys, and I'm going to kind of go over some of these percentages. I know they're not going to show up here, but I will tell you. Let me show you here real quick. I've handwritten them down. Everything right here. So I've done the difference between Derek Carr. So if Derek Carr was better than something, it would have been this one up here. And if Kirk Cousins is better than something, I put him down here. So I just kind of did it old school, but we'll kind of talk about it. And I'm just going to leave the Derek Carr stats up here, guys. All right. So first up, like I was saying, Derek Carr has 9 more games. So he's plus 9. The GS one right there. The GS, that's the game start as offensive or defensive player. So Derek Carr is plus 14. And then the overall record here, guys, the career record, Derek Carr is 76 and 67 and 2. And Kirk Cousins is 76 and 67. So, you look at it and you're like, or sorry, I think I had that wrong. So let me repeat that. All right. Derek Carr is 72 and 87. And Kirk Cousins is 76 and 67. So, you could do the math to figure out like who's got the better winning percentage. So the winning percentage is Derek Carr is 45%. Okay. And Kirk Cousins is 52%. So neither of their winning percentages versus losses are great. You know, Kirk Cousins just barely above 50%. So just kind of leave that at that. All right. And then completion percentage, Derek Carr, or completion, sorry, the total completions, Derek Carr has plus 111 as far as completions. And then attempts, Derek Carr has plus 329. So Derek Carr is throwing the ball a ton more, 329 more attempts and plus 111 completions. So Derek Carr is winning Kirk Cousins in that category. Okay. And then let's go to the completion percentage. If you look at the completion percentage of Derek Carr versus Kirk Cousins is plus 2%. So Derek Carr's completion percentage is 64.9. Kirk Cousins' completion percentage was 66.9. Okay, so that's important. The completion percentage for Kirk Cousins is quite a little bit better than Derek. And then we're going to move over to total yards. Okay, total yards for Kirk Cousins is plus 371. So let's think about that. Not so far, and I'm trying to be objective. I really am, guys. But so far, when you look at it and you're like, okay, so Derek Carr is throwing for more attempts. He's played 9 more games. He's had more completions, but the total amount of yards, Kirk Cousins is beating him by 371. Derek Carr's total yards are 39,100. And Kirk Cousins' total yards are 39,471. So Kirk Cousins is beating him in completion percentage so far and total yards. Okay. Then let's get into touchdowns, another important one. So I think like these 3 or 4 coming up are probably some of the most important ones, guys. All right. So for touchdowns, you know, Derek Carr had 242 for touchdowns right here, guys. 242 for touchdowns. And Kirk Cousins' total touchdowns were 270. So Kirk Cousins leads Derek Carr by 28 touchdowns. 28 touchdowns with Derek Carr playing 9 more games. Okay. So that's a huge, you know, we know Kirk Cousins got injured, and that's a factor to throw in here. But, you know, you look at it and you're like, man, Kirk Cousins is like, you know, hasn't thrown as much, and his completion percentage is better. He's got more yards, and he's got more touchdowns, beating Derek Carr by 28 touchdowns. Okay. And I know there's other factors that go into all this stuff, but, you know, I wanted to look at this objectively the best I could. Okay. Then let's look at the interceptions. You know, Derek Carr's total interceptions, 107 interceptions. Kirk Cousins' total interceptions, 110. So Kirk Cousins actually has 3 more interceptions than Derek Carr. So they're pretty close. I mean, you know, I think we're splitting hairs, but, you know, looking at objectively, Kirk Cousins still has 3 more interceptions than Derek Carr. And then the interception percentage difference is, you know, and, you know, it's a negative or plus 2%. So Kirk Cousins is plus 0.2% on the interception ratio. All right. And then we're going to scroll over here to the QBR. So, because I think that's an important one, the rate and the QBR. So the rate for Kirk Cousins is 98.2. Okay. And Derek Carr's rate is 92.3. So you look at that difference and you're like 5.9% difference in QB rate. So Derek Carr, 92.3, Kirk Cousins, 98.2. So Kirk Cousins' QB rate is quite a bit better than Derek Carr's. Okay. And then total sacks, Derek Carr, 295. Okay. Derek Carr's total sacks, 295, and Kirk Cousins, 304. So Kirk Cousins has been sacked actually more than Derek Carr. So Kirk Cousins been sacked 9 more times than Derek Carr. Okay. And then next up would be total yards lost right here, guys. Sorry. Total yards lost from being sacked. Okay. Derek Carr's total yards from being sacked is 1,842. Kirk Cousins' total yards from being sacked is 2,207. So 2,207. So Kirk Cousins, even though it's only 9 more sacks, Kirk Cousins actually has lost an additional 365 yards than Derek Carr, which is important. So Kirk Cousins getting sacked more, and he's losing quite a bit more yards. Okay. Now, if you take the amount of sacks per game, or sorry, the amount of sacked yards versus how many games they've played, I did the math because I was curious on that. I'm like, look, how many yards are we losing per game if we have Derek Carr? How many yards per game are we losing from Kirk Cousins? So Derek Carr's average sacked yards per game is 11.6. So on average, Derek Carr is getting sacked and losing about 11.6 yards. Kirk Cousins average of getting sacked per game is 14.7. So, Kirk Cousins is losing 14.7 per game on average, and Derek Carr is 11.6, which doesn't seem like a ton, but for like a pocket passer / scrambler, I mean, it's a difference of 3.1. So Kirk Cousins is getting sacked, or losing about 3.1 more yards per game than Derek Carr. Okay. Let's scroll back and let's look at the comebacks. That was an important one. So Derek Carr had 28 comebacks. Kirk Cousins had 22 comebacks. So Derek Carr is ahead of Kirk Cousins by 6 comebacks. And then the game-winning drives, Derek Carr has 34, and Kirk Cousins had 28 game-winning drives. So Derek Carr is winning Kirk Cousins for game-winning drives by, it looks like, 6. Okay. So, we'll kind of pause here for a minute. Let's kind of marinate on this, guys, and let's kind of think about this. So, objectively, besides the contracts and some of the other stuff, the win percentage, Kirk Cousins was 52, Carr was 48. Derek Carr was throwing for more passes, more attempts, and, had more completions. But when it comes down to completion percentage and total yards, Kirk Cousins was beating him, I'd say a little bit. 371 isn't like a ton. But again, Carr has played 9 more games than Kirk Cousins. The thing that really stands out, the few things that stand out is, the touchdowns. For Kirk Cousins to have almost 28 more touchdowns than Derek Carr, I think that's a huge statistic, because you got to have touchdowns. Now, Kirk Cousins has probably had better weapons in his career than Derek Carr, and that's a factor to consider. I'll be honest, it is. Okay. But, and then, the interceptions, I mean, I don't know. The interceptions, they were pretty close on. So I'm not going to, pick hairs, on the interceptions. I feel like one of them was really stronger than the other. So what do you guys think? Is there anything besides what I covered as far as stats goes that stands out to you, plus or minus, whether you're pro Carr, against Carr, Raiders getting Cousins, or not, or against Raiders getting Cousins? What did you guys see in there that stood out to you? I'm curious because, I'm trying to look at this objectively. And as I've dissected it, I'm not like super pumped that Kirk Cousins is the best answer. But I do feel like he's a little bit of an upgrade from Derek Carr, which was my initial thinking before I ran the numbers and the stats and stuff and looked at him, tried to compare him side by side. I tried to look at it just from a standpoint, what's going to stand out to me? Because the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the facts. And, those of us who have been Raiders fans and saw Derek Carr play for 9 years, we know what you get with him. I feel like at this point, with the Kirk Cousins, I feel like what you get with him as well. But, like I don't want to do a video where I'm talking about Derek Carr this offseason. The main reason why I want to compare this is, if we get Kirk Cousins, is it really an upgrade from Derek Carr, or should we have just kept Derek Carr? It is a legitimate argument. Okay. So not trying to get people fired up. Why are we still talking about Derek Carr? Like, I get it. I don't want to talk about Derek Carr either, but it's a valid point that I know people will bring up. No matter what QB we get, people are going to bring it up, So it's something I just wanted to cover this offseason. Kind of, pick your guys' brains. We'll cover a couple more things coming up. All right. So next up here, what I want to get into is quarterbacks that, in my opinion, I think there's a lot of not just Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins, but I feel there's a lot of quarterbacks all throughout the NFL are making a contract that they're not worth. Guys that got paid a bunch of money and either never earned their contract or currently aren't earning their contract. So I'm going to cover a couple of them. I'll pull up the screen so you guys kind of see what I'm looking at here. And, you guys might have a different opinion on this. First one that stands out to me, Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is not worth a contract that he gave. $245 million. Good Lord. That was a blunder from the Broncos. Straight up. Browns, another blunder with Deshaun Watson. He has not earned his contract. Maybe he still can turn around, but so far he hasn't earned it. I'm going to put Dak Prescott in this category as well, guys. $160 million. He's been mediocre at best. And, the Cowboys paid him a lot of money, so he hasn't earned his contract, right? Right here, Daniel Jones. That I don't even know why the Giants gave Daniel Jones a contract. I thought that one was terrible. And everybody can be morning quarterback, but I'm telling you, some of these guys aren't even close. The one I might argue is Ryan Tannehill. You might be able to say Ryan Tannehill has not earned his contract, but he did bring the Titans to a few playoffs. So if I look at it from that standpoint, excuse me, I could see Ryan Tannehill going like 50-50. And then Jimmy G, good Lord, another blunder from the previous coaching staff that I don't want to get into, but that was not a good contract. I mean, he's not making a ton of money, but still, it wasn't a good contract. And then, of course, right, we have the Kirk Cousins. Okay. This is the other reason why I brought this up. Kirk Cousins, 35. Well, that's because he's going to be a free agent. But then Derek Carr. Okay. So you look at this, and there's like, what was that? I don't know. We could count them, but like 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks that NFL teams have paid that they're not earning their contracts, guys. And that's important because you're going to pay a guy like that. You're trying to win a Super Bowl. You got weapons on your team, and your quarterback is the, like the thorn in the side, essentially, where they're just not pulling through with what they're earning. So, yeah, I was critical on Derek Carr's contract to some degree, guys, but I'm also critical on all these guys. And it's all through the NFL. It's not just Derek Carr and the Raiders and stuff like that. So, all right. So next up, let's pull up Kirk Cousins' contract so we can kind of evaluate that, because that all this stuff plays a factor. He's probably going to want 40 to 45 mil range. Okay. His average, per year, 19 million, but that's because contracts are backloaded, and that's also dealing with his first years in the NFL. They're just factoring in the average, but you look at what he's earned so far, and that's a lot of money, guys. $231 million is what Kirk Cousins has earned. And, I don't remember if I said it earlier, but I'll be honest, like for years, I've thought Kirk Cousins never earned his contract that he got from the Vikings. I think he got a pretty big contract, if I remember right, with the Commanders, and then got traded to the Vikings. So you can kind of see it there, but and kind of how much per year. He got paid a ton of money to go to the Vikings, the highest paid quarterback, I believe, when they gave him that contract, and he just has not earned that, and he's going to want another lucrative contract. Okay, which is all stuff you got to factor in. If you're a good organization, you got to look at all these things. Okay, which is what I'm trying to do, and look at it objectively, not just like, oh, that's my favorite player, and I'm going to do a YouTube channel where all I do is talk about Derek Carr. Right? That's ridiculous. So here's Derek Carr, 165 mil. You got to think he also hasn't been in the NFL nearly as long as Kirk Cousins, but part of that is because his contract is backloaded with the Saints. The Saints are in cap hell right now. I don't know what they're going to do, but they're just from the going back to Sean Payton and the cap hell he put him in. They've just backloaded these contracts, and it's going to catch up with them. So, the one thing I'll say with Derek Carr, I don't think he ever earned the contract with the Raiders, guys. I really don't, which is my main critique, which all the Carr lovers are going to, be mad at me and whatnot, but it's just the reality. I mean, there's so many quarterbacks in the NFL, guys, that has not earned their contract. And it's important, right? We're talking about winning championships here, right? What did John Gruden say? We're not going to the Rose Bowl or the Sugar Bowl or the Reese's Bowl. We're playing for the Super Bowl. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars literally on the line when it comes to these guys. When they don't step up to the plate and they don't pull through and they don't earn their money or their contract, we can find excuses or, maybe legitimate facts of why a quarterback or a situation didn't work out. But this is why it's important that you have to get it right, and you can't overpay these guys, man. There's too many guys getting overpaid that aren't worth the contracts they're making. One last thing I'll say on the Derek Carr thing, had he taken a deal of like 20, I'd say like maybe a Jimmy Garoppolo contract, 25 mil, somewhere in that range, then you have a little bit of money left over. You go spend it on a Max Crosby contract, maybe a Chandler Jones, maybe an offensive lineman, maybe a stud wide receiver. But when you're maxing out like Derek Carr's first contract that we gave him when he was the highest paid quarterback in the NFL and with the cap space and stuff like that, guys, and when the Raiders were like literally like when it came to profitability, back then, when we were in Oakland, we were 31st or 32nd in the NFL for profitability. We were literally last to second last in the NFL when it came to being profitability. How is the great shield of all of sports, of all of the NFL, and everything that Al Davis and the legacy, and we're at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to profitability, which has a factor when you're giving out bonuses, cash bonuses, so it doesn't hit your cap space as much. We're at bottom of the league. Okay. So maybe you should factor that in. You're like, well, that's the Raiders' fault for not being profitable enough to give Derek Carr more money or whatever. I could see that perspective. I really could. But I also look at it from a standpoint like you can't take so much out of the pot that's going to hurt your team, so you can't get the other pieces in place to make your team great, right? And so that's kind of one of the other last things that I wanted to say. And I'll wrap it up and I'll say one last thing on it. But let's move over here real quick to injuries. Okay. This one kind of surprised me, to be honest with you guys. So here's Kirk Cousins. I'm going to pull up here. We're going to look at the Kirk Cousins injury history. And, Kirk Cousins has been pretty healthy throughout his NFL career. I didn't think it was quite this good, but chance of injury, 6%, durability 5. So, projected in 2023 to miss half a game. He did get injured with an Achilles last year. We'll look at that. So in 2009, he missed one game. That was Michigan. That was before he was in the NFL. But then 2023, last year, he tore his right Achilles versus the Packers. Oh, that's kind of ironic that it was against the Packers. I didn't realize that. And Aaron Rodgers with the Jets tore his Achilles, who used to be on the Packers. That's trippy. So he missed the remainder of the season and probably hurt the, chances for the Vikings to, make a run at the Super Bowl. But, before he got hurt, Vikings were looking like a darn good team, guys. They really were. And, you could question with his age being 35, how he's going to recover from this Achilles tear. And it's a risk, especially if he's wanting 40 to 45 mil. Okay. So it is a valid point that people would make about him coming off the injury. Okay. Not going to hide it. So here's Derek Carr's injuries. Look at this. He's got injured all over the place. You could, point to it being a weak offensive line at times or something like that, but 7% chance of getting hurt. Projected games to be missed, less, 0.4, durability 5. And then it's just a plethora from 2014, sprained MCL, dislocated, broke his, here's 2016. This is the one that we all remember, where in the Colts game, we were doing great that year. Derek Carr was on an MVP run, dislocated and broke his right pinky finger in the snap, played the remainder of the game with the injury. And then here's the one against the Colts. Sorry, that wasn't the Colts game, but here's the one with the Colts where he broke his fibula and had to have surgery, missed the playoffs with us. So, and then there's been some little stuff, ribs. I'm not going to go over all of them, guys. I don't know, cranial concussion, but it does. I mean, we're at like, that's 2014 ankle sprain, but 2017, he's got a much longer list of injuries than, Kirk Cousins. But I'll be honest, like Derek Carr's been tough, guys. Derek Carr has played through some stuff, when he's gotten his bell just rocked, right? And some calls that should have been called our way for unnecessary roughness, stuff like that, right? So, I've tried my best, guys. I don't want to make this too long-winded of a video, but I've tried my best to look at all these things. Okay. We'll look at rushing and then we'll close this thing out and the pros and cons of each. And I'm not saying I want Derek Carr back, but again, as we're get into the rushing thing and close this out, what is the best, what's the best situation, guys? Right. I mean, what's the best situation for the Raiders to go to a Super Bowl in the next 1 to 3 years? If we get Kirk Cousins, to the Carr supporters, they're going to have a valid point that these guys are real similar in their skill sets and stuff like that. And it's not like Kirk Cousins is a super big upgrade, and, so I wanted to do a fair diagnosis of both. And hopefully I've been able to do that so far. And we'll get into the rushing here in a All right, guys, let's pull up this rushing stat right here. We're going to start with Kirk Cousins. Nothing stands out too much to me, guys. It just kind of proves that both these guys are really pocket passer / maybe scrambler. You might even be able to argue that they're more pocket passer than they are scrambler. Okay. Attempts, Kirk Cousins has 304, total rushing yards, 958. Touchdowns, this one did kind of stand out to me. We'll get into in a second here. 19. So Kirk Cousins has 19 rushing touchdowns. Okay. And, that was kind of, you could look at succession rate, 45.4%. But that was pretty much it for the Kirk Cousins rushing. And then Derek Carr here, his attempts is 310. He's rushed for 885 yards. And then the touchdowns, 6. He's only got 6 touchdowns, and his succession rate is 37.1. So you look at it like that. The attempts you could look at 310. Derek Carr had 6 more attempts, so he had more attempts than Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, however, and this is with Derek Carr having 9 more games. Kirk Cousins has 73 more total yards than Derek Carr, but the touchdowns. Remember, Kirk Cousins had what was it? 20. Pull it back up here. Kirk Cousins had 19 touchdowns. Okay. So, Derek Carr, 310 attempts, 885 yards, 6 touchdowns right here. And then the success rate of 37.1. So Derek Carr's only got 6 touchdowns. Kirk Cousins had a total of 13 more touchdowns than Derek Carr. And then the succession rate, Kirk Cousins was above him by like 8.3%. So the point is, if you look at the average, I did the total. They don't have it on here that I've seen, but if you do the total games each of them have played, and you add up the total yards, divide it by amount of games played, Carr is going to average per game 5.6 rushing yards. Kirk Cousins average per game 6.4 rushing yards. So if we look at this from a standpoint of the average rushing yards per game, I don't even know if you could put either quarterback in a scrambler style category. I think you almost have to put Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr in a pocket passer category. Like if they had, I don't know, like if we were to have like a bar set, like a quarterback has to get more than 15 yards rushing to be in a scrambler, or 10 yards or whatever it might be, you might be able to put them in the scrambler category. If you have a quarterback and you're like, to be mobile, you got to have 20 yards or 15 plus yards or something. And then running style, right? If you like, just to do the math here real quick, if you have a running style quarterback like a Justin Fields, which is high risk, right? High risk, you play 17 games, you're going to rush for say 1,000 yards per season. 1,000-yard quarterback per season is like 58 or 59 yards per game, guys. So, the running style quarterbacks are going to rush for 1,000 plus yards. They might average 60 yards per game. So maybe a mobile style quarterback has to rush for 20 plus yards per game on average or something like that. But if you're at the bottom tier and you're literally Carr running for 5.6 and Kirk Cousins running for 6.4, I don't think you could put them as an improviser quarterback or a scrambler or anything. You might say they can scramble out of the pocket, and that's a valid point, but they're definitely not mobile. A mobile quarterback would be getting at least, I'd say, 10 to 15 yards per game, maybe even 20 yards per game to get those first downs. Okay. So that's the other reason why I wanted to break up the categories: pocket passer, scrambler, mobile, running style quarterback. Okay. And a Tiger can somewhat change their stripes, right? Like a running quarterback, a Justin Fields can learn how to be a pocket passer. We've seen it in Lamar Jackson, right? He's ran a lot less this last year, but and developed into being a better pocket passer quarterback. So, but I think it's easier almost for a running style quarterback to transition to being a better pocket passer than it is to help to try to make a pocket passer quarterback be a running style quarterback. Because just not everybody has those athletic abilities and like God-given talents. So, I think quarterbacks in the NFL can change their stripes somewhat, but not too far off the beaten path. I think they'll always be kind of who they are, and to be honest, you guys, I mean, you should have a quarterback that you're going to cater to their skill sets. You don't want a quarterback that's not fast running or whatever, maybe run here and there. But, with that being said, the last thing I'll say about Derek Carr, guys, is like, because I don't want to hate on him. I wish him the best, right? I'm not rooting for the Saints. I'm not talking about the Saints, but it's some valid points to compare these guys. But I feel, even still, okay, especially with the defense doing as well as it is, like I feel that we could have won a Super Bowl with Derek Carr. I really do. I think we still could, but I don't want him on our team. I don't think he's worth the money. But like, when I look at it, I look at the defense, the weapons we have. If we get, say we re-sign Jacobs, we get offensive linemen. If you have a Derek Carr or Derek Carr style quarterback, I think you can win a Super Bowl. It may not be ideal. I'm going to be honest with you guys. This isn't like, there's really no ideal situation for us, right? Because if you draft somebody, then you have to change the game plan from the winning a Super Bowl in 1 to 3 years to then you got to change your game plan to maybe 2 to 4 years. Okay. In my opinion, at least. So that makes it tough. I still think we should look to the draft and stuff, but when I look at it from the 1 to 3 year time frame, I really think Kirk Cousins gives us the best bet. But then it comes down to how much is he worth, right? We tried to look at all the data, all the things I've thought about for weeks here, guys, literally weeks, months. Okay. About the contracts, the injuries, the stats, pocket passer, scrambler, mobile, but I wanted to kind of, before I kind of made a more analytical, like kind of diagnosis, I wanted to see who our offensive coordinator is going to be and kind of think about maybe their style and their scheme. Our coach, Antonio Pierce, has said he wants a physical football team. So it might be a little bit more old school. He might want to run the ball. Okay. I was a firm believer. We get a Cliff Kingsbury. I don't think Aiden O'Connell fits that scheme. We get a Cliff Kingsbury. Kirk Cousins doesn't fit that scheme, right? We get a Luke Getsy, and people will look at his time with the Bears and, judge him on those 2 years off as offensive coordinator. But I think you almost have to go back more to his roots of being with the Green Bay Packers, and that he's probably going to want a quarterback in a scheme similar to what the Packers ran with Aaron Rodgers, okay? Which means you're going to be looking for a pocket passer / scrambler. Or you might be able to tip it as much as mobile style, but Justin Fields is not a mobile style quarterback. He can be mobile, but that's a running style quarterback, guys. That guy's running way too much. You don't want your running back running 800 plus yards per game, season, or 1,000 yards per season. That's just too much risk, guys. You're going to pay a quarterback 40, 50 mil, which is probably what the realm that Justin Fields is going to want after this year, 50 plus mil, 55 mil, and you want him running for 1,000 yards per season. That's nuts. To the Raider fans, I think that's a smart decision. That's a high risk, dude. That's a high risk him getting hurt. I'm not saying it can't work, but it's, I think you got to have a good plan B if that's going to be your plan A. So the point is like we get Luke Getsy, okay, and a Kirk Cousins fits a Luke Getsy scheme a lot better than a Justin Fields, okay, because of just scheme fit and talent wise. But, after looking at all this, I'm not going to sit here and be like, Kirk Cousins is a huge upgrade over Derek Carr. I think he's a little bit of an upgrade. And then it's like, what is he going to want, right? I mean, Ben kind of went over it. Raider Ben went over it the other day, talking about maybe if you take 35 mil, consider it, I mean, had Derek Carr taken a real friendly contract, 25, maybe 30 mil max, maybe we do it. And I was saying the whole time it should have been 20, 25 mil. He should have taken like half of what the market was. I'm still waiting for either a good to great quarterback or an elite quarterback to pull a Tom Brady. Like he once did and be like, you know what? I don't want to be paid over the top. Pay me half of what the guys that are making like the 50 mil guys, right? Just pay me half of what they're making. And then them go out and win a championship because they took a huge pay cut, an actual pay cut. I'm still waiting for some elite quarterback or star quarterback, good to great quarterback, do that for an NFL team. Like, you know what? Don't pay me all that money. I don't need all that. You guys use that money to build an elite team, and we're going to go win a championship. But you don't see it. Everybody's about that money. And I get it. These guys are going to get, could get hurt, concussions, and possibly lose their life, God forbid, or have problems the rest of their life. So I get why they're all wanting to get paid. But at some point, there's going to be some quarterback that's not going to, they're going to be like, you know what? I'm good with 25 mil. I'm not eating top ramen. I'm going to be still eating, filet mignon steaks. I have generational wealth. Just pay me that 25. We're going to go win a championship and get it done. And unfortunately, the Raiders kind of did that with Jimmy G. That was about like his pay range, but Jimmy G was not worth that contract, not with the injury and all the other stuff. And you could almost say that with Kirk Cousins, right? If I'm being real, he's got the Achilles tear with the injury. If you're going to pay him more than 25 mil, maybe that's a huge risk as well. So it's interesting. If he's healthy, I'd pull the trigger. And, I don't know if I try to look at Derek Carr's making about 37 mil on average with the Saints, is I believe what it came out to. Maybe you give Kirk Cousins something similar to that, but I'd be more inclined to try to figure out a way to get that dude in the 30 to 35 million range. And then, you pull the trigger on that. But if he wants 40, 45 mil, I don't think we can do it, guys. We might have to run it back with Aiden O'Connell, which, you know what? If we do that, we look to the draft, it's not the worst thing. It just kind of conflicts with my 1 to 3 year plan. Okay. So appreciate you guys, man. It's been a long-winded little show here, but hit the like, hit the subscribe, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Again, try to do my best to be fair to all sides of the coin, no matter if you're pro Carr, against Carr, or whatever. Wishing the best, but I don't want to talk about him that much this offseason, but the subject's going to come up, so I wanted to break it down. Appreciate you guys. I'm Hardcore Raider. There's only one nation. That's Raider Nation. Hardcore Raider out.